The steel door clanged shut behind Michael, the sound echoing through the long corridor like thunder. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The air smelled of bleach, sweat, and something sour that made his stomach churn. Guards marched him forward, their heavy boots striking the concrete floor. All around, inmates leaned against cell bars, staring at him with hungry eyes. Some whistled, some laughed, and one deep voice called out, "Fresh meat." Michael's heart pounded so hard he felt it in his throat. He had never been so afraid in his life. When the guards stopped, they unlocked a cell and shoved him inside. The small room held 2 bunks stacked against the wall, a scratched-up steel toilet with no cover, and names carved everywhere. A man sat on the bottom bunk, tall with tattoos covering his arms and a jagged scar across his cheek. He looked up slowly, eyes cold and sharp. "Name's Darnell," he said, his voice low and steady. Michael didn't know if it was a greeting or a warning. The first shock came at dinner. Michael followed the others to the cafeteria, the noise growing louder with every step. The air buzzed with shouts, laughter, and the clattering of trays. When he reached the serving line, the food dropped onto his tray made him gag. A scoop of gray mashed potatoes slid into one corner, a lump of meatloaf oozed grease, and beans floated in watery liquid. Inmates behind him snickered. "Eat up, rookie," one sneered. Michael sat down, hands shaking. He had barely picked up his fork when shouts erupted behind him. 2 inmates leapt across a table, fists flying. One grabbed a sharpened spoon, swinging wildly at the other's neck. Trays crashed to the floor as guards rushed in, slamming the men to the ground. Michael froze, his fork slipping from his hand. All around, other inmates laughed or cheered like it was entertainment. He realized then that this wasn't a TV show, not some movie. This was his new reality, and it was brutal. Back in the cell, Michael sat on the edge of the bed, silent. Darnell studied him for a moment before speaking. "Listen," he said. "In here, the first day matters. You look weak, they'll test you. If you don't stand up, they'll own you." Michael swallowed hard, trying to understand. Darnell leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Someone's already got their eye on you." Michael's stomach dropped. That night, the lights cut off with a buzz, leaving only faint glows from the hallway. Michael lay down on the thin mattress, the springs poking his back. But sleep didn't come. Yells echoed down the block. Metal banged against bars. Somewhere, someone screamed, a high, sharp sound that made his blood run cold. He pressed his hands over his ears, but it didn't block it out. Then he saw movement at his door. A shadow stretched across the bars. Michael sat up fast, his chest tightening. A whisper came from the dark hallway, low and cutting. "Tomorrow you're mine." The words slithered into the cell like poison. Michael's breath quickened. He turned to Darnell, who was watching him with eyes wide open. "I told you," Darnell murmured. "They already picked you." Michael's hands shook as he lay back down, staring at the ceiling. He could feel sweat on his forehead even in the cool air. He knew the worst was yet to come, that sunrise would bring the real test. His first day in prison wasn't over. It had only just begun. The morning siren roared through the prison, rattling Michael's nerves. His eyes had barely closed all night. Every sound, distant screams, the clanging of bars, the whisper from the hallway, had pressed into his chest like a weight he couldn't shake. When the lights flickered on, reality hit. The threat was real, and he had to face it. Guards shouted, their voices harsh and commanding, as they pushed inmates out of cells for roll call. Michael shuffled in line beside Darnell, trying to steady his breathing. His body felt stiff, his mind scattered. He could sense eyes all around him, studying him like an animal trapped in a cage. Some stared coldly, others smirked as if waiting for him to break. Michael lowered his gaze, but his fear was plain to see. Breakfast followed roll call, but the meal was no comfort. On his tray sat a scoop of pale scrambled eggs, a slice of bread hard enough to chip a tooth, and watery coffee that smelled more like metal than food. Michael poked at it with his fork, appetite gone. Darnell leaned toward him, chewing steadily. "Back to the wall. Don't let them see you panic," he muttered. Michael nodded, though his shaking hands betrayed him. Across the cafeteria, the man with the shaved head and snake tattoos, sat with his crew. His grin widened the moment his eyes locked with Michael's. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. That silent stare was worse than words. It promised something Michael couldn't escape. He forced himself to swallow a bite of bread, his throat tight, his heart thudding like a drum. Later, the guards marched the inmates out into the yard. The sun was bright overhead, but it did nothing to warm the chill in Michael's stomach. The yard was alive with movement. Groups lifting weights, others circling the track, clusters of men standing in corners whispering. The ground itself felt dangerous, divided into invisible territories that Michael didn't understand. He stuck close to Darnell, whose eyes scanned constantly. But then it happened. The tattooed man strode across the yard with his crew, his steps slow, deliberate. He stopped right in front of Michael, towering over him, a cruel smile curling his lips. "You're the new guy," he said. His tone was light, almost casual, but his eyes carried menace. Michael's mouth went dry. His body locked in place. Before he could respond, Darnell stepped forward. "He's with me," Darnell said, his voice firm and low. For a long moment, silence fell. The yard seemed to pause, all eyes waiting to see what would happen. Then the man chuckled, shaking his head slowly. The sound made Michael's skin crawl. "With you? We'll see about that." He turned, walking away, but his gaze stayed fixed on Michael until he disappeared into the crowd. The rest of the day passed like slow torture. Michael scrubbed floors with other inmates, the mop heavy in his hands. He heard whispers behind him, saw glances he couldn't read. Guards paced, but never interfered, as if blind to the tension simmering in every corner. Hours stretched into eternity. When evening came, Michael dreaded the cafeteria. Still, he followed Darnell inside. The noise was as loud as before, trays clattering, inmates shouting, but underneath it, Michael felt a hush of expectation. He sat, praying silently for just one quiet meal. But prayers meant nothing here. A tray slammed onto his table, so hard the food splattered across his lap. Michael jumped, his heart leaping to his throat. He looked up, and there was the tattooed man, grinning like a wolf that had cornered its prey. "Told you I'd find you," the man said. Before Michael could react, the man snatched his tray and flipped it, dumping the last of the food onto the floor. The cafeteria went silent. Dozens of eyes turned their way. Michael's chest rose and fell fast, his hands trembling. Darnell stood up, his face hard, his fists clenched. But before he could move, the tattooed man's crew surrounded them, closing the circle. The air grew heavy, thick with danger. Michael's pulse surged. The man leaned in close, so close Michael could smell the bitterness of his breath. His grin widened. His voice came out low, sharp, final. "Welcome to prison, rookie. Let's see if you survive the night." Michael's vision blurred for a moment as panic swept through him. The walls, the guards, the other inmates, none of it mattered. He realized then, with chilling clarity, that the brutal truth about inmate life was no longer a warning. It was here, pressing against him, trapping him, daring him to survive.